Elisa sang on the streets, not out of a dream but out of desperation. Her son was sick, and every note was a silent plea for help, until a pink Cadillac stopped beside her, and the impossible happened. Where are you watching this story from today? Tell us in the comments. The sky over Compton, California, was overcast that morning, carrying a heavy grayness that seemed to reflect the lives of those who lived there. The streets of Rosecrans Avenue were bustling, with old cars slowly navigating the potholes in the asphalt. The sound of engines mixed with music escaping from radios, creating an improvised soundtrack for the neighborhood. In front of a small convenience store, Elisa carefully positioned herself with her guitar. The instrument was old, its wood chipped in several spots, but still tuned enough to accompany her voice. She wore an oversized coat bought years ago from a thrift store and shoes so worn that the soles almost touched the ground. Compton was a place of extremes. The vibrant graffiti decorating the walls contrasted with the worn appearance of the buildings. At the small community market where Elisa sang, vendors tried to attract customers with cheerful shouts, offering fresh fruits and flowers in metal buckets. Despite this, most people passed her by without a glance. Elisa knew that no one there had time to stop. Many were busy dealing with their own problems, racing against the clock to keep up with rent or secure dinner for the night. But that didn't make her give up. Her voice was soft, yet full of emotion, a mix of pain and hope that filled the empty space between parked cars. She looked at the small plastic container she had placed beside her. Inside were just a few coins and a crumpled bus ticket. Elisa sighed but kept singing. At that moment, her thoughts were far from the street. In the tiny trailer she called home, her 7-year-old son, Lucas, rested on an improvised bed in the living room. The image of her sick child kept her going. Lucas had big, bright eyes, but his body was frail, weakened by an illness that seemed to drain his strength more with each passing day. The doctors had said the treatment was expensive, far beyond what Elisa could afford. Each hospital visit was a cruel reminder that time was working against her. Yet, Elisa refused to give up. Singing was her only option. As a gentle breeze rustled the fallen leaves on the ground, Elisa transitioned to another song. The melancholic notes seemed to capture the essence of the place, a neighborhood full of deferred dreams but still pulsing with life. A woman stopped momentarily, listened for a few seconds, and dropped a coin into the container. Elisa smiled and thanked her with a gesture, but the woman had already turned away. In the distance, the sound of children playing echoed from the park. The small playground was surrounded by a rusty wire fence, with swings creaking under each movement. Elisa remembered when Lucas was healthy and loved running to that park. Now, he could barely get out of bed. She paused her singing momentarily, taking a deep breath to contain her emotions. Around her, no one seemed to notice her pause. Elisa knew that tears wouldn't pay for Lucas's treatment, so she quickly wiped her eyes and resumed playing. The morning wore on, and Elisa remained there, singing with the same intensity. But exhaustion was setting in. Her fingers ached from pressing the strings, and her throat burned from so much singing. Just as she was about to pack up and head home, something happened. A black Cadillac, gleaming despite the cloudy sky, slowly turned the corner. The engine purred softly as the car approached and stopped right next to where Elisa was. She froze for a moment, her music dying on her lips. Cars like that weren't common in Compton. The dark-tinted windows kept her from seeing who was inside, but the metallic shine of the wheels sparkled like something out of place. The doors didn't open immediately, but Elisa felt a shiver run down her spine. The Cadillac remained still, as if waiting for something. Elisa looked at the black Cadillac parked beside her, the soft hum of the engine sounding like a faint buzz in the silence that had formed. The car seemed completely out of place, a luxurious machine amidst the humble neighborhood. For a moment, she thought the driver was simply waiting for someone, but the passenger side window began to lower slowly. A faint cloud of smoke drifted out, carrying a distinctive aroma. A man leaned slightly out of the window, wearing large dark sunglasses and a laid-back smile. He was impeccably dressed, a beige suit with gold accents and a heavy chain around his neck that sparkled as if freshly polished. There was no mistaking that face. Snoop Dogg. Elisa blinked, trying to believe what she was seeing. Why would someone like him be here parked, listening to her music? Before she could say anything, he raised a hand, signaling her to stay quiet as she held her guitar with trembling hands. "Keep going, girl," he said, his voice deep yet smooth. "I want to hear the end of that song." At first, Elisa hesitated. Fear of judgment froze her. He was famous, an icon. She was just a woman trying to earn coins on a street corner. But then she took a deep breath, adjusted her guitar, and resumed singing. Her voice felt different this time, stronger, as if carrying her entire soul. The notes were clear and powerful, filling the stillness that had settled around her. When she finished, the silence was deafening. Snoop Dogg tilted his head slightly, as if carefully weighing every word of the song. Then, a wide smile spread across his face. "You've got a rare gift, you know that?" he said. "What's your story?" Elisa swallowed hard, hesitant to respond, but something about the way he looked at her made her feel like he genuinely wanted to hear. "I sing to try to pay for my son's treatment. He's very sick," she replied, her voice soft but steady. For a moment, Snoop said nothing. He took one last drag of what he was holding before extinguishing it in a small portable ashtray. Then he stepped out of the car, adjusting his suit and sunglasses. As he approached, he seemed even more imposing in person. Yet his relaxed smile exuded something genuine. "What's your boy's name?" he asked. "Lucas," Elisa answered. Snoop nodded thoughtfully. He glanced at her guitar and, with a simple gesture, asked to hold it. Elisa handed it over, still in disbelief. He strummed a few clumsy notes, laughing at his lack of skill. "Well, playing isn't my thing, but listening, that I get. You've got something special." Elisa didn't know how to respond, so she just muttered a shy thank you. "Listen, I'm going to give you a chance. I've got a charity event next week, and I think you'd be perfect to open the show. The proceeds go to charity, but I can promise there'll be enough to help your boy. What do you say?" Elisa felt the world spin. It was as if everything she had endured had led to this moment, but at the same time, doubt crept in. She was nobody. What if she failed? Snoop seemed to sense her hesitation. He placed a hand on her shoulder and said firmly, "Look, sometimes all we need is a chance, and I'm giving you one. You don't have to answer now, but think about it." He handed her back the guitar, returned to the car, and drove off. The Cadillac disappeared around the corner, leaving Elisa standing there, still clutching the instrument. His words echoed in her mind, "All we need is a chance." She looked at the container of coins, then at the horizon. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. Elisa stood on the sidewalk for long minutes after the Cadillac disappeared around the corner. Snoop Dogg's voice still echoed in her mind. All we need is a chance. She clutched her guitar tightly, as if that gesture could keep her connected to the surreal moment she had just experienced. When she finally began walking back home, doubt had already begun to take over her thoughts. As much as the opportunity seemed like a dream, something was holding her back. Fear. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? When she arrived at the small trailer she called home, Elisa found Lucas still lying in bed, his eyes glowing with curiosity as he saw her walk in. He smiled, something he rarely did in recent months. "How was it today, Mama?" Elisa tried to smile back, but her hands were still trembling. "It was different," she replied hesitantly. She sat down beside her son and began recounting what had happened, trying to downplay the importance of the event. She didn't want to give him hope she might not be able to fulfill. Lucas, however, was enchanted. "Snoop Dogg, really?" he asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "Mama, you have to go." Elisa shook her head, staring at the floor. "Lucas, I don't know. This is too big. I'm just a woman singing on the street." "But you're the best singer I've ever heard," the boy insisted. "And if he thinks you're good enough, then you are." Lucas's words struck a chord deep within Elisa, but the fear still weighed heavier. She began to think of all the times she had been ignored, belittled, or even ridiculed while singing on the street. The idea of stepping onto a stage and performing for a larger audience seemed impossible. Later that night, while Lucas slept, Elisa sat on the small couch with her guitar on her lap. The coins she had earned were scattered across the table, a cruel reminder of how harsh her reality still was. Is it worth the risk? The question haunted her. On one hand, she knew she might never get another opportunity like this. On the other, the possibility of failing felt unbearable. The silence of the night was broken only by the soft sound of the guitar strings. Elisa played absent-mindedly, as if the notes could bring her an answer. But deep down, she knew there was only one choice: to take the risk or stay in the same place. The next morning, Elisa was still consumed by doubt. While preparing coffee for Lucas, her thoughts about the encounter with Snoop Dogg mixed with the noise of the old coffee maker and the muffled sound of cars passing by outside. Despite her son's optimism, she continued wrestling with her insecurities. Then something unexpected happened. As she washed their only mug, Elisa heard a firm knock at the trailer door. She frowned, hesitant. Almost no one visited them. Quickly drying her hands, she opened the door. There he was, Snoop Dogg, leaning casually against a black SUV that had replaced the Cadillac. He wore a casual jacket, sunglasses, and a smile that seemed to carry the weight of years of experience, yet also an unmatched lightness. "Thought I'd stop by before you disappeared on me," he said jokingly. Elisa froze, unsure of how to react. Lucas, hearing the voice, peeked out from behind her, his eyes wide with surprise and admiration. "It's really you," the boy exclaimed. Snoop laughed and crouched down to greet Lucas. "And you must be Lucas. I heard a lot about you yesterday. Did you know your mom's incredible?" Lucas nodded enthusiastically, his smile so bright it made Elisa's heart ache. He seemed so happy that for a moment she felt as though all their struggles had vanished. "Can I come in?" Snoop asked, gesturing toward the trailer. Elisa hesitated for a moment but stepped aside. He walked in, glancing around. The space was small, with simple furniture and a few toys scattered on the floor. Humility was evident, but Snoop seemed comfortable, as though he had grown up in a similar place. "I understand where you're coming from, you know," he said, sitting on the small couch. "I didn't have much growing up either, but I had people who believed in me, and I learned one thing. When an opportunity comes your way, you have to grab it with both hands." Elisa sat in a chair across from him, still nervous. "I don't know, it's too much. I've never sung for more than a handful of people on the street." Snoop interrupted her with a gesture. "Everyone starts small. I started the same way. But what matters isn't the size of the stage, it's the size of the story you have to tell. And your story? It deserves to be heard." She glanced at Lucas, who was still standing by the door, his eyes full of hope. Then she turned back to Snoop. "I'm afraid of failing." "Everyone is," he said firmly. "But fear doesn't pay the bills, and it sure doesn't help Lucas. What helps is believing in yourself." Snoop pulled something out of his pocket, a card with the address of the charity event and the phone number of one of the organizers. He handed it to Elisa. "Just call. We'll handle the rest." Elisa took the card with trembling hands. That small piece of paper felt heavier than anything she had ever carried before. "I don't know how to thank you," she murmured. "Just show up," he said, standing up. He patted Lucas on the shoulder before heading to the door. "And take good care of your mom, kid. She's special." As Snoop left, Lucas ran to Elisa and hugged her tightly. "Mama, you can do it. I know you can." For the first time, Elisa felt he might be right. In the week that followed, Elisa experienced a roller coaster of emotions. The charity event was approaching, but her insecurity still loomed over her like a heavy cloud. Every night, after putting Lucas to bed, she would pick up her guitar and practice until her fingers ached. However, every note she played seemed burdened with doubt. At the small community market where she often sang, Elisa received both support and criticism. Mrs. Marge, the kind woman who sold flowers, was one of the first to hear about Snoop Dogg's invitation. "That's wonderful, Elisa," Marge said, handing her a small bouquet. "No one deserves this more than you." Elisa thanked her with a shy smile, but not everyone shared the same enthusiasm. A man who worked at a nearby garage scoffed when he heard the story. "Oh, sure, you're singing with Snoop Dogg now?" he said, laughing loudly. Stuff like that doesn't happen to people like us." His words echoed in Elisa's mind, a cruel reminder of the barriers she had always faced. But she didn't have time to let it discourage her. Meanwhile, Lucas became her greatest source of support. He sat beside her every evening, insisting on hearing every song she planned to perform at the event. "You're getting better, Mama," he would say with the enthusiasm of someone who truly believed in her. Elisa's dedication didn't go unnoticed. One night, while she was rehearsing at the market, a young man named Jaden, who often played keyboard at the local church, approached her. "Hey, I heard you singing. You've got an incredible vibe. If you need help at the event, I can back you up on the keyboard," he offered. Elisa hesitated for a moment. She wasn't used to accepting help, but she agreed. Jaden brought something new to her songs, adding soft chords that highlighted the depth of her voice. However, the challenges continued. The day before the event, Elisa's guitar suffered an unexpected setback. One of the strings snapped during rehearsal. With no money to buy a replacement, she thought about giving up. But when she told Jaden about the problem, he just smiled. "Don't worry about it. I've got a spare guitar. I'll go get it now." When he returned with the instrument, Elisa almost cried with relief. That simple act of kindness reignited something within her, the feeling that she wasn't alone. Even so, the nerves consumed her the night before the event. After Lucas had fallen asleep, Elisa sat in the living room, staring at Snoop Dogg's card on the table. His words echoed in her mind. "Fear doesn't pay the bills." The next day, as she fixed her hair in front of a cracked mirror, she remembered all the times she had been ignored or humiliated while singing on the street. But now, something was different. For the first time, she felt she had a real chance to change everything. She put on her best outfit, simple but clean and carefully pressed. Before she left, Lucas held her hand and looked at her with a confident smile. "You're going to be amazing, Mama." When she arrived at the venue, her nerves returned in full force. The stage lights, the sound equipment, the murmur of the crowd, everything felt overwhelming. Elisa had never felt so small. But then she spotted Snoop Dogg in the distance. He looked directly at her and gave her a small hand gesture, as if to say, "You've got this." Elisa took a deep breath. It was now or never. The stage lights blinded Elisa as she positioned herself with the guitar in her hands. Her knees trembled, and her heart seemed to beat faster with every passing second. The crowd in front of her was larger than anything she had ever faced. The murmurs of voices mixed with anticipation and distraction. At the back of the stage, Snoop Dogg watched her with an encouraging look. Elisa adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, and for a moment felt as though time had stopped. Lucas's words echoed in her mind. "You can do it, Mama." With a soft strum of the guitar, she began to play. The first note came out shaky, but as she continued, the melody began to take shape. Her voice, filled with emotion, cut through the initial silence of the audience. It was a song about struggle and hope, inspired by everything she had endured up to that moment. Slowly, the murmuring in the crowd faded. People began paying attention, captivated by the sincerity of her performance. Elisa closed her eyes and poured her entire soul into the music. Every verse felt like a piece of her story being laid bare for the world to see. At the back of the room, a small group started clapping softly, and the sound grew. Elisa opened her eyes and saw something she had never imagined. People were truly listening. Some were even holding up their phones, recording the moment. When she finished the last note, the silence was brief but intense. Then a wave of applause erupted, filling the space with energy. Elisa could hardly believe it. For a moment, she stood still, staring at the audience, trying to absorb everything. Snoop Dogg walked onto the stage next, his smile wide. He took the microphone and said, "Now that's what I call real talent. Let's give another round of applause for this amazing woman." The audience responded with even louder applause, and Elisa felt tears streaming down her face. They weren't tears of sadness, but of relief and joy. For the first time in a long while, she felt she had won something. Backstage, Snoop Dogg congratulated her personally. "I knew you had something special, now everyone knows too." He handed her an envelope. Elisa looked at him in confusion. "What's this?" "A portion of what we raised today. It's for you and Lucas," he said. Elisa opened the envelope and saw the amount inside. It was more than enough to cover her son's treatment. She nearly fell to her knees, overwhelmed with emotion. When she returned home that night, Lucas was awake, waiting eagerly. He had watched the live stream online, thanks to a neighbor who lent him a phone. As soon as Elisa walked in, he ran to hug her. "I saw everything, Mama. You were incredible." Elisa held her son's face, her eyes shining. "I did this for you, my love. Things are going to get better now." She knew that moment was only the beginning of a new journey, but something inside her had already changed. For the first time, she truly believed in herself. In the days following the event, Elisa's life began to transform. The money she received was enough to start Lucas's treatment, and although the process would be long, there were already signs of improvement. Seeing her son regain the sparkle in his eyes gave Elisa a strength she never knew she had. With the visibility from the event, other opportunities began to arise. Small gigs at cafes and community events helped her gain more financial stability. But Elisa knew her true mission went beyond that. Using her story as inspiration, she began organizing benefit performances to help other families facing similar struggles. Snoop Dogg stayed in touch, offering advice and even participating in some events. During one of their conversations, he said, "You didn't just change your life, Elisa. You showed that anyone can rise up, even under the toughest conditions." Years later, Elisa watched Lucas, now a healthy and energetic boy, as he helped organize instruments for a charity concert. Her voice continued to echo, not just in songs, but in the lives she touched with her story. Looking toward the horizon, Elisa knew it all started with a choice, believing that her music could save not only her son, but also rekindle hope for so many others. Sometimes all we need is a chance. Those words from Snoop Dogg changed Elisa's life and her son's, showing that music has the power to transform realities and reignite hope. Snoop Dogg is not just a music legend, but also a source of inspiration through his actions and stories of overcoming challenges. Want to discover more incredible and impactful moments he's been part of? Click here to dive into more heartwarming and inspiring stories about Snoop Dogg that will surprise and motivate you. Don't miss the chance to see the human side behind the legend.